I'm glad to be here with you and take very seriously the opportunity to address you. So I want to thank the Dean for her hospitality. I've got some members of the Diocese of Atlanta, former and current, so a couple of priests here, seminarian, and two former priests and colleagues. I was elected in the Diocese of Atlanta, so Traywin and Nan were my colleagues as I was a priest there. And so it's wonderful to see familiar faces here, and I'm just so glad to be here with you. I think a lot about, and by the way, thanks for me following up Brian Stevenson last year. So thanks for that. I appreciate that. I'll do my best. Let me tell you what I'm really interested in. I'm really interested in leadership. Not just sort of, leadership, the run-of-the-mill sort of, the $40 billion industry that is in America right now, not that. But like, if we were to distill some of Jesus's actual leadership behaviors, what might we learn? Is there something to maybe strip away the mysterium tremendum from Jesus just for a minute? All the swag, right? Take it away for just a minute. And then to look at this uncredentialed Jewish guy wandering around without the benefit of formal authority. Let's pay attention to him and see what we might learn. I'm really interested in that because you and I are called to serve the church at a time of immense complexity. Am I in the right group? Is this the right room? Yes. There are, in fact, no easy answers such that I've been doing this work. And so I think we ought to go back to the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. When I do that, what emerges is a wonderful overlap with the cutting-edge conversation around leadership that comes from lots of our best institutions and universities in America. And so my small add value to the conversation about Jesus and leadership is to notice the overlap between something called adaptive leadership and Jesus. Got your interest so far? Not only am I interested in it, as some of my clergy colleagues would tell you, I've tried to implement some of these principles in the Diocese of Atlanta. And it's interesting to see how they have taken shape or not taken shape, right? Because it's all about learning. Say amen. Amen. It's all about learning, right? So let me just start with a couple of set-up principles. And what I hope is, that I got the time staring right at me, I hope to stop with about 15 minutes left, and then I really want to hear from you. I'm from Pittsburgh. They make them strong there, right? So I really hope that you'll push and pull with me on these ideas. I know in Georgia we teach people to be nice, but nice doesn't actually appear in the Bible. Kind does. And so I hope that we'll be kind together and we can push and pull on some of these ideas. I'll get through some slides, but I'll stop right on time, and then I have some time to address you tomorrow, and then we can just pick up from there. Is that okay? So here, these are not, well, they are in order, but these are sort of some of my guiding principles here. Here we go. My daughter helped me with the animation. Here, I believe that God is real, able, good, and generous. I start there. I don't start with the church. I start there. I believe that the Episcopal Church is declining. That's an objective fact. The most recent tally was 37 congregations. We are 37 congregations fewer this year than last year. I don't believe that the Spirit is constrained by the temporal, which is to say God is still up to something. And I think that we need not despair, nor deny, nor apply euphemisms to the situation. That's important. Circle that. Write that down and circle that. We have other options than to despair or deny or apply euphemism to what is actually fact. So here we go. What I believe is that what we need is the courage to be curious, given the facts, and to figure out what faithful action might look like going forward. To be curious. Now, this may seem terribly, let me just say, this may seem terribly pedestrian to you. But I find that while we all know this stuff intellectually, I find that we don't apply it when we're sitting at vestry tables or boardrooms or so on. We're rather more invested in maintaining the status quo, right? Rather than applying courage of curiosity. Here we go. So I believe that there's a synergy between Jesus and his work, as we find in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and the work of another Jew, Ron Heifetz from Harvard Kennedy School. I believe that they were not contemporaries, by the way. They're not. I think faithful action, we can land on some ideas about faithful action if we look at the overlap between these two ideas. So that means you're going to have to really familiarize yourself with adaptive leadership, not just sort of, the conversation in leadership in the church, this is my experience, perhaps not yours, is about 6 miles wide, but only about a quarter of an inch deep. Like we also have bookcases that have leadership this, leadership that, or the other thing, but we haven't fastened ourselves to any particular conceptual framework that we've sort of applied and have great experience with. And so I'm arguing for this. I think when we do that, we can figure out some ways forward. I think that why I commend this particular construct is because I think it provides reliable coordinates. I have a British lady in my dashboard. Do y'all have her? And she gives me reliable coordinates. And even though I sort of look like, it looks like I know where I'm going, she's there to remind me where I'm at. And so I think we need reliable coordinates, particularly now, given the complexity of leadership work now. I think a lot of people are well-intentioned. A lot of people are praying, wearing out their knees, but they don't have a sort of set of sequences or coordinates to go forward with, something that's reliable. And so I find that the learning around leadership is very uneven, and I think that's unnecessary. I think we can do better. But I'll say this. Oftentimes, church folks are very resistant to conversations about leadership. I told my wife, I said, when I say that, I know they're going to make noises. I know that, right? Because we feel like to talk about leadership in the church context of the church is to sort of welcome in some corporate raider. I say you're wrong. I read a book once that said, the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. Which means whatever I can use to advance the kingdom of God, I should use. As long as it's not cross purposes with the gospel of Jesus Christ. So if there's some good mind, some good think, some good work about how to mobilize people to achieve a good goal, I should know something about that. I should bring that into my work to advance the goals of the kingdom. So I would argue you out of your siloed approach to all of that. Right? Our bottom line is the best bottom line. Right? We're inviting people into a life with Jesus Christ. Right? Or my other great theologian in this regard is a gentleman from Augusta, Georgia. His name is James Brown. And James Brown said, you got to use what you got to get what you want, right? So what do you want in your leadership? What do you want? Where's the end zone? What do you want? What are you going to use to get there? Right? I think that there's something we need to do here that will help us deal with the complexity that is present and this thing we don't want to talk about, which is loss. People say people want to resist because of change. I submit to you that nobody in this room would resist if I told you you were the Powerball winner tonight. That would be a significant change, would it not? It would be for my bottom line. So it's not necessarily change you will resist, it's loss. It's loss, or the potential for loss, right? This is what's got hold of us. So how do we make our way? What's the lexicon we use? What are the action sequence steps? What do we use? I think there's something here. We get an expansive lexicon to work beyond authority. I want to make a distinction a little later on between leadership and authority. They're not the same thing. Anybody here going to be ordained? A few people. All right. You know that the word leadership is not in the ordinal, don't you? Did you know that? The word leadership is not in the ordinal. It's not. What happens at ordination is authority of the church is being conferred upon you. which is a different idea than leadership behavior in this construct altogether. And I think an important distinction. And I feel like some of this leadership work that Jesus gives us to do and Ron amplifies will grow us up. What's the goal? Paul said that you and I should grow up in the full stature of Christ. I love it. I love it when folks know the Bible, right? That's great. You got a dean who's a Bible teacher, so I'm testing you along the way here.
I thought that was in the prayer book.
It's in the prayer book. It is. It is. It is. That was an Episcopal answer right there. And then I think Paul said somewhere else that we ought to put away childish things, right? Think, understand, and speak like a child. I put them away. Now I'm a man. Now I'm a woman, right? So I think that we need to grow up, some of us. We need to increase our capacity. Yeah? Here we go. So what were some of Jesus' leadership behaviors? Y'all don't mind if I talk about Jesus, do you? Some people like to talk about the ethereal risen Christ. And I appreciate that. That's important for me. Christ has died. Christ has risen. Christ will come again, right? That's important, right? But he was also God incarnate among us. He walked on dirty roads, got his feet dirty in our lives. Jesus of Nazareth, born of a woman, lived among us, right? So I want to know, what did he actually do? Well, I got some ideas. I pulled these ideas from this book I read. He lived the distinction between authority and leadership. Go back to read again, looking through this lens, and find out how many times the Pharisees and scribes asked him, by what authority do you do this? By what authority do you do this? Aren't you Joseph's little boy? Don't you have a little funny thing surrounding your birth? Who are you again? All right? He was explicit about his purpose. If you go back and look at all the things that Jesus said about his purpose, he came from a purpose-driven family. His mother was very clear. Right? When the angel showed up, she was very clear who she was and who she was she not? That wonderful first rap song by a woman rap star, the Magnificat. I mean, in the New Testament, you can go back to the Old Testament, there was another rap song there. All right? She was very clear. Jesus was actually focused on mobilizing people. You should put that in your mutual ministry review. How many people did you actually mobilize one year to the other? Wouldn't that be an interesting criteria? How many people did you involve in the work? Because Jesus did that. I mean, if you're the Lord of Lords, King of Kings, you left a gated community called heaven and came to earth, you could actually do it all by yourself. Unless your goal is something else. And that is to mobilize people. I like how you're laughing. I'm just going to keep telling you jokes so you stay awake. I mean, the hour is late, right? Right? His goal was to mobilize people. I mean, who are we that God should think so highly of us? To share the work with us. And yet, that was God's work. To share the work with us. That you and I might have eternal purpose. Wow. It's pretty amazing. What a privilege. He harnessed reflection, individual and shared, as a tool for work, right? That whole thing at the top of the mountain with the booths. You know those are Episcopalians, right? As soon as you have a divine encounter, you got to build something, right? Right? You think that's funny? That's funny. That's okay. But how reflection was not just something we talked about, prayer was not just something to talk about, but it was that place where you could go and disconnect, right? Rabbi Heschel talks wonderfully about this whole thing, his notion of Sabbath. How is where I go to be human, right? It's how I beat off all the constraints of the market economy, at least for 24 hours. How I rehumanize. And in that rehumanizing process, I reflect. I reflect on my own fusedness, my own collusion with system. And I get a chance to catch yet one more glimpse of defined differentiation. All right? So what I do this. So there's my first plug, writing to your bishop and telling me, you're observing your prayer. That's cute, but do it. Why don't you? Because it's essential. And if you think you're going to do it later in the parish and don't practice it now, you're lying to yourself. If you don't build that square footage now, you're sunk already. Because it's coming at you real fast, real soon. Any clergy who are already out here doing the work, can you say amen already? Amen. I didn't get with them earlier. If you don't build that in now, right? It's just coming at you way too fast. It's highly unlikely you'll pick it up later. He addressed adaptive challenges. Adaptive challenges are as distinct from other things, and I'll talk about that some more, are norms, worldviews, and value shifts. Think about all the conversations he had. Were they about, what color the wall is going to be? No. Were they what color the carpet was going to be in the temple? No. Right? Give unto Caesar what is Caesar's, right? Give unto God what is God's. It's a wonderful little peek into that, right? That's trivial. Give it to them. Things temporal, right? We work on the big stuff, the norms, the values, right? That's a way to check your calendar as you're doing the work. Are you working on the big stuff during the week? Or working on the small stuff? We have decorated the hell out of the Titanic. I say that with great love and affection, having done the work myself and made all the mistakes. If you think I sound smart tonight, imagine how many mistakes I have made in 20 years. Right? We're decorating the Titanic and it is of no effect. We've got to work on the big issues, the adaptive issues, the real issues in front of us. He was clear that loss had a role in the future. But we promise our brothers and sisters a win-win. You're being seduced into something you cannot manage. There really is no win-win. There's a loss. There's a loss. I know that my clergy, I wouldn't put them on the spot, but I know they memorized my speech to Diocesan Council 2 years ago. Where I talked about what is necessary is not pastoral mystery, not pastoral care, but paschal care. Right? You would think that given our liturgy, and thank God for our liturgy, that because we say Christ has died, Christ has risen, Christ will come again, that you and I would pull that down into real life and have some great facility with managing loss. But it seems like we're sitting at distance at that. Right? What we need is not sort of everything's going to be all right. What we need to say is that the foundation of our faith is, you see that cross? You see those nail holes? You see those thorns? You can make it through. Right? Nobody gets through unscathed, but you can make it through with this God. And not only that, this God will walk right alongside of you. But there is loss. And I think because sometimes we're a little unprepared or reticent to talk to people in terms of loss, then we give their spiritual development opportunity short shrift. And we maintain, unfortunately perhaps, we maintain a level of infantilization. Rather than saying, you know what, real life has loss in it. Not I'm saying you should lead with that every sermon, I'm just saying we should build our repertoire to be able to have conversations, meaningful conversations with people about that. This is why God made, I don't know what the version here is in Texas, but this is why God makes Waffle House and Starbucks in Atlanta. So we can have these kind of conversations with people with integrity, right? Share responsibility for kingdom proclamation and enlargement. Jesus could have done it all by himself, right? But yet you and I are invited into the work. Jesus shares the work. He shares the work. This is important for us, especially who are given over to the terrible spirit of people-pleasing. Right? Because, I mean, it may have a nucleus of good intention, but what ultimately ends up happening is you deny people an opportunity to take their share and responsibility for the kingdom. So they never fully live out their baptismal covenant. We have lowered the ceiling height because we have not been able to manage self. That's why I said this is spiritual capacity stuff. All right? He invited partners to increase their capacity to accomplish works of power. That doesn't need much of an explanation. More Jesus. How about that? Even in the Episcopal Seminary, we're going to talk about Jesus, right? Jesus talked a lot about the difference between current reality and aspiration, right? I don't want to get political, but let's just have some fun, right? Colin Kaepernick took a knee, and you can think whatever you want about it. And I'm happy to have a cup of coffee with it or stronger and talk about it. Because he did not find in the ideals of America an accounting for what he was experiencing on the ground in terms of lack of convictions of officer-involved shootings. Current reality, aspiration. We got to figure out how to get across that bridge together. current reality and aspiration, right? Now, we can debate about when to take the knee is appropriate or when not to take the knee. That's not the point. The point is we've got to have a conversation about current reality, and we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men and women are, et cetera, et cetera. Do you see the difference? So one of the great gifts we can do when we go to the parish sometimes is to, as best we can, and take some time with it, to locate where we are. What's our current reality? And then hold up that congregation's founding ideas, what they say about them. I read parish profiles for a living. Do you know that everyone is welcoming? We are a welcoming and happy church. They haven't had a guest since Jesus was a teenager. Current reality, aspiration. One of the great gifts we give people is to just say, tell me more about that. How do you account for these numbers? Those poets we call the prophets, that's all they did. Current reality, aspiration. And you see what it got them, right? And here's a big one for you. And this is a big one for me. Because I think this is where it comes out of the 40,000-foot area and comes down to us and is an invitation for personal growth and to live the words we pray and to close the gap between mine and behind, right? And that is, to what degree do I collude with the very things I say I'm against? Maybe Nicodemus got a stirring of that. That's why he came by night. There was something in him that was awakened in Jesus' presence and preaching, but he just, it was there. It was a pebble in his shoe. He wanted to get it square, right? He recognized that his mind and behind were not in line, right? The opposite of shalom, right? So don't give up chocolate or ice cream from Lent. Give it to me. Because chocolate and Lent are no problem with me and God, right? Maybe what we do at Lent and other seasons is we ask ourselves, we have a big boy conversation and a big girl conversation with ourselves, or maybe with a spiritual director, or with a wise guide, and maybe we talk about our collusion with status quo. This is not about guilt or shame or browbeating. It's not about any of that. It's just about how do we move more fully into the words we say we're about. And that's just the journey. That's the journey everybody's on, I pray, right? All right. So then what is adaptive leadership? This is the synergy part. It's a practical leadership framework. How many people know about Ron Heifetz's work? I mean, more than just familiar, you just sort of know the name. Good, great, good. I think it's really important because it's an old work. I mean, this is not, I'm not breaking any sort of records here. I mean, he wrote this book in 1994 called Leadership Without Easy Answers. And Bishop Frank, our former presiding bishop, Bishop Frank Griswold, brought him to address the House of Bishops to start talking about these concepts. And you know what happened? He was received like a prince coming home. No, he was not. It blew up. A legendary explosion. Legendary. So you know what Bishop Griswold did? He had him back again to talk about these concepts and how there was a lot to learn. We're in a challenging environment. That's why I gave you the church decline thing, right? Most places don't even talk about church growth. Maybe that doesn't happen here in Texas, but in many dioceses that doesn't happen. Do you know how difficult it is to talk about church decline in a diocese as a diocesan? Very difficult. People want to apply despair, denial, guilt, shame, or euphemism, rather than saying, let's get curious about this. I know of what I speak. People don't want to talk about it. I've been in the House of Bishops now 5 years. Do you know how many conversations we've had about church decline in the House of Bishops? I'm just come back from Alaska. You know how many conversations, and this is going out over Facebook, and I really don't care. You know how many conversations we've had? 0. I'm not throwing anybody under the bus. I'm trying to illustrate for you in real time that this is very difficult. And that's why I said curiosity needs to be modified with courage. This is very difficult. As Bishop Frank Griswold said to me one time when I was asking him about this, why did you bring Ron to the house? What were you trying to achieve, et cetera? I was sort of going on, and he just sort of interrupted me. He said, remember, Rob, clergy will default to shame and guilt every time. because we take this so personally. We're so fused to it. Right? And perhaps we need to remember that this is Jesus' church. Back up just a little bit, not hold it quite so tight, and get a little curious. Maybe that's a capacity that some of us could increase in. Right? He said the gates of hell will not prevail. I was worried there for 2 seconds. Right. Right. So let's take him at his word. What does that mean? What does that mean? What new iteration is the Spirit up to right now? As we sort of finish one iteration and maybe move into this thing that none of us really know what it's going to be, but we just sort of believe in faith. That's why I started off with God is real, able, good, and generous. I don't know. We don't know. None of us know. I talk to all the smart people. I read all the smart people's books. Nobody knows. What we know is that we're called to get up tomorrow and be faithful. Try to figure out what that might look like. And to invite the church to be faithful. Individually and collectively to take on gradual and meaningful process. With adaptive stuff, you never solve the problem. You can only make progress. Right? That's a very important distinction from technical work. Technical work, we know I needed a lavalier microphone. The young gentleman got me a lavalier microphone, plugged it in. We had all the know-how, and here we are. Right? He set up my Apple computer. We had all the information. Great, no problem. In adaptive work, we don't know what the problem is. Therefore, we don't know what the solution is. And that's why it makes it so difficult. If I went around this auditorium right now, I would get just as many answers as there are people here to why the church is declining. And I would get just as many solutions to the problem. Right? It's very complex, very, very difficult. And that needs to be the space where we spend our time. And here's this thing about diagnosing the essential from the expendable. The essential from the expendable. How do we know what to take forward? How do we know what to leave behind? I'm glad you asked. The prayer book. How many people have got the preface to the prayer book memorized? Don't you lie in this place. Well, I did some research, so I'm digging the whole Jesus thing, and I'm reading the whole Ron Heifetz thing, and I get to talk to him on occasion, and then I started going through my prayer book, and then I realized this very paradigm is in the prayer book. It's on page 9. Can you imagine that there is this notion in the prayer book that how we make our way in terms of liturgy and as a church is we hold tradition in one hand, but not only that, in the other hand, we hold the exigencies of time. And therefore, the work is the tension. What does it mean to be Episcopalian going forward in the 21st century? What does that mean, right? So what the work is not is holding on to the tradition until your knuckles turn white, full stop. Neither does it mean what I call religious ambulance chasing, right? Anything that looks like it's emerging, just grab onto it and go for a ride. Whee, right? That's not us either. But this notion of Anglicanism is somewhere in between. That's the work, and that's why it's hard. And that's why the training that you're receiving in this place is so important. Right? So let me give you a definition. And then we're getting up to some question time. So this is you may have, what I usually do when I do this exercise is I ask people to write a one-sentence definition of how you would define leadership. So I've already messed it up by showing you this, right? But I was worried about the time. But, maybe in your own time you could do that. What's your one definition, right? Maybe you have someone else's. Maybe you've got one that you've developed over the years. Maybe you're still figuring it out. I like Ron's. Ron's is the capacity to mobilize people to address tough problems, especially problems they'd rather avoid. Can we get that one more time? Leadership is the capacity to mobilize people to address tough problems, especially problems they'd rather avoid. Do you see how that if you lay that over the gospel, you get some really interesting exegesis happening there? as Jesus encounters the community, as he pushes the envelope, as he addresses the tough problems, especially the problems nobody wants to talk about. Who's a neighbor, who's not a neighbor, who's clean, who's not unclean, what's sacred, what's profane, right? All of these things. He's rounding out the community, giving it dimension. What I like about it is that implicit in this definition is leadership is not a role. I am not a leader because I'm a bishop, right? I am a formal authority. That's all I am. I could, for 10 years, run my big mouth, preach some halfway decent sermons, have coffee and cookie with all the right people, and at the end of 10 years, people would say, not a bad bishop. You know, respond to my Ember Day letters, right? Not a bad bishop, you know, make the right donations to the right causes. Not so bad. In Ron's definition, none of that is leadership. Leadership, the most difficult work, the most sort of the highest art, the best skill is specifically devoted to problems that emerge that we want to avoid. You know you're working on adaptive stuff if you're working on something that we don't want to talk about, right? So if you remember anything tonight, just know this. You don't have to intellectualize any of this. Forget whatever I said. But when you confront a situation in the church or some other sort of organization and you feel it in your tummy, that's an adaptive challenge. That's an adaptive challenge, right? Because there's risk there. You're confronting worldviews, norms, and values. Whenever that happens, so let's start at the top of the funnel. What's an adaptive challenge for our country? Climate change? Immigration? Hot dog. It's like y'all read the Times this morning. What else? I mean, it's on the newspaper every day. Race relations, nuclear proliferation. What else? I mean, it's right there, right? Huh? Abortion is another one. You know you're on an adaptive challenge if you know you just can't legislate it away, right? So Emancipation Proclamation 1863 or 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, and here we are. We can't authority it away. Women's suffrage in the 20s, right? Still. I can make more than her just by virtue of my biology, right? Adaptive. Let's come down the funnel a little bit. What's adaptive in the state of Texas?
Toilets right now.
Toilets. The sad part about it is I know what you mean by that, right? All right. Right. You have to have certain apparatus to go pee in certain places. What's adaptive in Texas? Sanctuary cities. Healthcare again. Education, the disparity in, right? Yes. The wall, border security, indeed. Immigration. Voting districts. Rewriting history, that's right. That's a big deal, right? In Richmond, to start messing around with monuments is a big deal. That's right. We call it the Wawa in Georgia.
Our textbooks affect textbooks all over the United States.
There you go. There you go. What's adaptive in the church? What else? LGBTQIA. I'm learning. I got to keep catching up, right? What else? In the church. Oh, the hush. What does the hush mean? Patriarchy in the church. Who gets the jobs? Pardon? Church building. Indeed. Declining membership. Exactly right. Music. Now, music occupies a funny space. Music occupies a space that there's an overlap. Is that a Venn diagram? It's an overlap between adaptive and technical, because what seems like strictly technical, and I've been a rector, and I can show you the scars, right? So what seems like a purely technical decision, I'm the guy who fired his organist after being in the parish for 18 months, who was there for 22 years. I'm that guy. technical, right? Not so much. So there is an overlap. So I want to make sure you mark that for yourself. There can be an overlap. Something can present as technical, but be thoroughly adaptive. Because music can mean so much. Who we are, it's about identity. Adaptive issues in the church. Evangelism. Say more about that. That's a big one.
Willingness to practice evangelism, not for the sake of growth, but as a deep spiritual practice.
It sounds like you already had some of those conversations already, because you moved right away from around the word growth.
Well, I'm a church planter, so I kind of have to be able to say that.
Yes. I learned as a rector that the Great Commission is very low down on the list of what parishioners are interested in.
Yeah.
And I went in there full bore. I thought that's why we were all here on Sunday. I've learned since. I'm learning. So you get it. And so I would ask you to also keep in mind, I wonder how many meetings you have about that. I wonder how many groups you actually spend time working on the adaptive challenges in front of us. What we end up doing is siphoning off the energy from those really weightier matters into smaller matters. Right? And we do that consciously or unconsciously because of the complexity. And because perhaps we might increase our capacity to talk in terms of loss. Right? And so that's just, this is why I call them reliable coordinates. It's not that the answers are here, but it is at least I know where I'm at on the track. Right? So think in those terms. What does the community want to avoid? Now, let me just throw one caution in. Because sometimes, I get in there and I can be an energetic speaker, mostly in the morning, not in the evening. But, and then people will say, I'm going to go out and try that, And here's what I've learned. A little bit of karate will get your butt kicked. You know what I mean? So in other words, don't go to the pulpit on Sunday and be like, I heard this big mouth bishop, and yeah, you guys suck because you don't want to work on adaptive issues, and here we go, and Jeremiah, the 3rd chapter says yes, and right? And that's what happens sometimes. Some of y'all are smiling because you might have done it or tried it yourself, right? The reason why I commend these coordinates is because, if you do the steps, if you take your time, even if you watch Jesus, how methodical he is, right? It's really not about going in and blowing people up. The work, rather, is going alongside people, trying to find that next step on the road. That's different. That's different. It's easy to go in, on a self-righteous tirade and blast people and walk away and do nothing. In fact, do more harm. It's another thing altogether to locate people. The 3 capacities are observation, interpretation, and intervention. And sometimes observation to find out where we are reliably can take a year. And it might drive you crazy if you're predisposed to doing stuff. Right? But what you're doing is you're getting a real good 3-dimensional picture of where we are. So that then you can begin with people to talk about how do we understand this. Anybody enter into a congregation, lay or ordained, and think you had it all figured out, only just to sort of figure out the floor dropped out soon thereafter and you really got wisdom? Or some saint of God took you and bought you some coffee and helped you? Can I tell you a story real quick? So my first... I told you, I've made so many mistakes. That's why I sound so smart. I started off as a rector in Atlanta. I was called there from the Cathedral of St. John and Divine, and I went there, and I thought I had it all figured out. I was in New York mode, but I was in New Georgia. Pay attention. And so I thought what was required of me, my first annual meeting, was to tell them, this is 2002, I thought, still on New York time, my job was to tell them where we were going to be in 2032. And I had facts and figures. I had one hell of a presentation, let me tell you. And at the end of that, this is no hyperbole, at the end of that meeting, 300 people present, not even crickets. So somebody prayed and we were adjourned. And some saint of God, if you're lucky, you'll meet these people. some saint of God will look on you with pity and say, well, there's something in that fool that I should salvage. And I was bought a lot of coffee after that, and I was told the following sentence: we sure appreciate your presentation. It's Georgia. We thought maybe we'd do a couple of Christmases and Easters with you, and then think about what we do after that. You see? I had no standing, no credential, no trust to even begin. The work on the way to this was to be and to observe without being seduced. Right? Well, I learned. I learned. And I think that, I would also have you remember that too. I don't really talk in terms of failure. I think what I like about this concept is we run experiments. You put a stake in the ground, and then you iterate. You try something. I think to be unfaithful is to try nothing. I would rather have a priest come to my office with his teeth kicked in for trying something than to talk to a bunch of clergy who haven't tried a blessed thing in a while. I think because we're in a liminal time, it's begging for us to try something. I think we try something in community with people wiser than ourselves, in conversation with people. Right? That's the capacity. I'll talk to you a little bit about tomorrow I got a whole long list of capacities I think we need to increase on. But one of the capacities I think we need to increase on, and I've talked about this in the Diocese of Atlanta, we just finished our presbyters retreat, is the capacity for me to be with you and you to be with me. I'm really not into kumbaya. Like I'm ex-Navy. We jumped out of helicopters and we all act tough and we were all terrified, right? I'm that guy. So I'm not into kumbaya, but what I do realize is that if you and I don't practice the community that we preach about, then you and I really have an immature piety that is not durable enough to do the work of change. It's just immature. It's just not durable, right? And so, of course, I know you practice the very best part of all this here at Seminary Southwest. But can I just help you right now? So just get over yourself, right? And stop being so defended. You're not perfect. I'm not perfect. You got blemishes. I got blemishes. You got blessings. I got blessings. So when we have fellowship and opportunities, colloquy, or whatever you do here, we have a chance. Don't have to hemorrhage over people, but just bring some authenticity to it. Why don't you? Because you know what? Congregations can only rise to the spiritual maturity level of the person who has the microphone most often. And so if you have no experience with Christian fellowship, not just, where you vacation or where the kids going to school at, that's not Christian fellowship. I mean, it could be maybe the front door to Christian fellowship. I'm talking about something else, where I see you as sinner, you see me as sinner, I see you as traveler, you see me as traveler. Right? You hold me accountable. I hold you accountable. That's the Christian community I think is envisioned by the gospel. Yeah? All of that is part of this. It's a journey. That's why I say capacity. So capacity is not just sort of some Harvard, business review thing. Capacity is our capacity to be human and authentic. Because that's what people hear when you got the microphone. I always think that, maybe Jesus was just like the most authentic dude that people met. I mean, you could take all the, sort of fancy Greek words away. Maybe he was just like the most authentic dude they had met who talked about God. And they were like, I don't know where the hell his credentials are from, but I'm going to hang out with him a little while. Plus, he's serving fish. I'm going there, right? All right, let me finish up. So I was just in Alaska. I was in Fairbanks. And one of the best parts of the whole meeting, the House of Bishops, was, Athabaskan, which is the Eskimo people of many tribes, one after the other came and addressed us. Because welcome is a really, really big deal, right? And these two women, it was important that they were women, were warriors really against the oil industry. I know that you can't say that here, but they were real warriors, right? Because they didn't want the pipeline. They weren't against the oil, but they didn't want the pipeline running through the caribou birthing areas. And so at great expense and a great travail, they were sort of back and forth to Washington. And, you talk about the little train that could. I mean, these people got nothing, and they're warring against an industry. And she was reading out of the book, and I didn't get the book, but this was the quote, really. And I think I want to remind us of this, right? So you don't have to buy anything I'm selling tonight. But in the spaciousness of uncertainty, of the complexity that you and I find ourselves in right now, we have to act. I hear people tell me how much they love the Episcopal Church, and I believe them, and I love it too. She's been a home, a rock and a refuge for me. I came in the door as a college student, and it was everything for me. Now, isn't that enough to want to pass on to somebody else? Even if it means that it's going to look different for my kids. I mean, do you love her that much? Right? So in the spaciousness of the uncertainty that you and I find ourselves in presently, we've got to find what the action is, what faithful action is. And what I love about the economy of God is my action will be different than Laura's action, or Traywin's action, or your action. It will be different. Right? I mean, I think that's what's really cool about God, is that you've got your own story and you've got your own add value, and so do I have mine. Right? And so imagine if you and I really sort of went deeper in that baptismal covenant power, not just the words, right? And then came up and offered our add value, unfettered by some of the fears that you and I, and the sin that so closely clings, right? What would we have? I'm going to stop right there. As you can see, I could talk a little while, so I'll stop. And I just wonder if there's some questions or some criticisms or some clarities or whatever. I'd love to spend the next couple of minutes that we have just chatting with you. What did you hear? What didn't you hear? What would you like to hear? Go. Just tell me your name when you stand up. Yep. Please.
Jane Patterson.
Jane.
I teach New Testament.
Uh-oh.
New Testament
Uh-oh.
teacher for you.
Uh-oh. I knew there were some ringers out here.
So, is there a particular story in the New Testament that just comes into your mind right now, something from the Gospels, in which Jesus is sort of caught out in a moment of exercising adaptive leadership? Just like a moment. It doesn't have to be somewhere like the entire thing, but
Yeah, a lot of them, but I wrote, one is go. Jesus' best sermon, right? Which really shames the rest of us who preach for 15, 25 minutes or so, right? Go. Because I think implicit in go is that you've been with me, your capacity is increased, now I want you to share the responsibility, or go ahead of me, right? I mean, so I think that, John 14, greater things will you do than even I have done. I mean, I think there's so many moments where the Lord of Lords endows us or shares with us, I'll tell you one great one, which I think is kind of funny, is the Jesus on the back of the boat in the storm, right? So why? Why is that leadership? Because I don't think Jesus was asleep at all. I grew up, he called it playing possum, right? I don't think Jesus was asleep at all, so forgive me, the New Testament, I got New Testament scholars here just waiting to get me afterwards. I think that was, are you going to now lay claim to the authority that you have? And I think Jesus' work in some of those stories is to provide strategic absence so that other people might step up, which is a gift I think some of us ought to refine. Not abandonment, strategic absence. So there's any number of stories. I'm grateful for that question. Yeah, absolutely. Great question. Anybody else? Yes, sir. What's your name?
My name's Greg.
Hi, Greg. Uh-oh. Is this your diocese, Texas?
No, I'm from Diocese of Arkansas.
I know Larry Benfield very well. Uh-huh.
So I'm like Larry, I come from business background.
Yes, sir.
And I've worked in a lot of leadership stuff.
Yes, sir.
To say what you're saying is kind of scary. Because
Good.
You're saying you don't know what the problem is, you don't know what the solution is.
Yes, sir.
And the answer is go.
Yes, sir.
So,
You got it. My work is done here. I'm ready.
go where? Go what?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
A year ago, a while ago, because it
Yeah.
feels like it would just be
Chaos.
activity for activity.
Yes, sir. Well, this is right. I'm doing the best I can in 45 minutes, Larry. Greg. I think that's not my invitation. I think that's the Lord's, right? I mean, he tells fishermen and really sucky fishermen. That's a Greek word. To preach. Right? So I think that in the going, what's supposed to happen in us is a radical dependence. Right? Ed Friedman talks about in his last book, which he didn't finish, which somebody remind me of the title of, Failure of Nerve. He talks about the fallacy of data, and I believe in data-driven experiments going forward. But the truth of the matter is, if we're honest, more honest sometimes than we want to be, is that the data only supports us so far. It doesn't take us the whole bus ride home. So I think that, the disciples, even in the going, had some information, had some experience, but they had to iterate. The missionary journeys were, again, I'm scared to talk here in the room with all these scholars, but in my opinion, humble opinion, the missionary journeys were one blooming failure after the other. Right? It's just that they ended up landing in wonderful, important ways where he connected deeply. Right? But from a business guy, there was no spreadsheet. There was no, he was like hoping for the best. He was falling asleep on the job and, things were talking to him in his sleep, go over here. So I don't mean to make too much fun of it, but I do think that in the going is the learning. And so I think that, you and I are refreshed, should be refreshed every day about, okay, what does going require today? And I think if we keep in mind that my work is on the adaptive challenges, not the technical challenges, right, then I think I have some coordinates for going. I don't think it's totally haphazard. Tomorrow I'm going to talk about, which may help you a little bit, I'm going to talk about the role of purpose. I know Chad was waiting for this. The purpose in this, right? One of the things that keeps me anchored, right, is purpose, right? And so, maybe you'll sleep on that tonight is, what is your purpose, right? That's the anchor. That's the orienting factor that helps me manage my egoistic needs, purpose. And then that's the magnet that helps me to create an ally base, that you and I come together not because we're being nice or because we grew up here together, but because you care of your own volition deeply about the same thing that I care about, and that you and I get to work on that. So there's a few more steps thereafter. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Jeanette. I'm a local creative stay-at-home mom.
Wow. Got it.
Okay, so I just, based on what you were saying, I thought of something I've learned from the creative community, which is called 100 rejection letters. And it's something the church could take on, which is come up with proposals.
Yeah.
And send them out and put a star on your chart every time you get a rejection. But as you move forward
Yeah.
in your creative experimental process, you're going to get a vision for what you're supposed to be doing.
Right. Refine, right, down to it. Church culture is some of the hardest culture to fail in. It's easy to fail in business. We've done it. One of the reasons we developed that answer, we've always done it this way, is because now we've grown cynical for trying. And because we weren't celebrated for giving a shot, we were actually condemned for trying, right, and that it didn't work out. So now you have a lot of people who, I started an innovation fund when I started off as bishop. And I thought, boy, if I just hung some money on the line, the ideas would come pouring in. Guess what I learned? Not so much. It took a while. Now, I knew I was building a culture, so I had that against me. But what I also learned is that there was real reluctance to try and perhaps fail publicly. In some other leadership books I've read, what they try to do is defy that culture by developing some good humor around that and having a celebration of the most audacious failure in the diocese or in a convocation or in a clericus group. Again, where you disempower this notion of failure and you try to re-energize trying. But you're absolutely right. There are other businesses, other entities that do a much better job than we do. And I tell you the other thing, this is why I try to drill home this notion of a more authentic fellowship. One of the other reasons why we don't try and fail is because a lot of clergy culture is built on competition. Now, you don't have to tell me I'm right. I already know I'm right. You know the fastest way to grow the church, don't you? Is just for me to ask you how many people in your church. She's going to tell me 152. I have to tell her what? 173. So there's such a competition. And look, I'm not talking down to you. I'm talking as one of you. Right? I know this is the stuff that bedevils us. And it squeezes out opportunities to together try some stuff. Because people are worried about what that person is going to think about you. And then we end up doing nothing. Nothing. And then the joy goes out of people. You combine that with overwork, and then you got a terrible recipe. All right, maybe one or two more. Yes, sir.
How do you discern the pastoral needs of a congregation or a community that's not really ready to grow, but needs to grow and change, versus your gifts for helping them get there? Like if you have a heart for inspiring a community in such and such a way that they're not quite on board, but you see the potentiality
Yeah.
for
Right.
adaptive leadership and adaptive change.
Right.
What's that threshold for you? Could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. I think so much has to happen on the front end as much as possible. When you go and interview, I think we need to remember as clerics that we need to interview congregations as much as they're interviewing us. Right? I just told you that every congregation is happy, welcoming, and wants to grow. Right? But you really got to root around in that a little bit. And you got to look at the numbers, you know. Don't ever go into an interview without knowing, like the back of your hand, the profile, and looking at the history stuff. Come on, that's your work. Right? So you have to know that. And then, let's say y'all say it's a fit, you're going to give it a try, right? Then I think, the only thing you have, I use going forward as a tool was the parish profile. And so as I gently tried to get to know people and made all the stupid mistakes, that some of which I've shared with you, then you just ask them, is this who we are? Aspiration, current reality. And then you find gentle pressure points on that. But it's a gradual journey. And so, what's that wonderful line, do not grow weary in well-doing? Yeah, he's talking to us. Because, what I had to learn really fast, just because of my own, the way I'm sort of built, is that a congregation, especially not a diocese, a diocese or a congregation is not a Ferrari. It's an aircraft carrier. And so if you need immediate gratification, that might not be your fit. I think the other thing too is that, and this is the hardest possible work, is you have to get to a place where people listen to so many divergent voices to where you really get to, do they want to grow, or is that what they feel like they should say? You have to develop the love and trust, right? And they have to feel like there's no condemnation in you, that you're going to condemn them. That you have to encourage somebody out of the corners to tell you the deal. My congregation, I took a congregation in 2002, $190,000 all in, 150 people all in, 15 people in the choir, right? In 10 years, it was 500-600 people on Sunday, 100-person volunteer choir, something else, I don't remember what else. And let me tell you, that was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life for 10 years every day. And a lot of that work was, well, how much does he want to grow? I told you, we found that people wanted the bills paid, but it wasn't like throw the doors open and welcome people in the name of Christ. Right, so we had to do a whole lot of work about whose church is this. And they were very clear. It's our church. And so
Who are all these newcomers?
exactly.
I don't know them.
I'm telling you, man. My naivete was like, I should have just had a shirt say, I'm stupid, right? People were pissed. Our biggest problem was parking and seating, and people were pissed. So, that's the work. And then you got to find those alpha males and alpha females, and you got to have conversations with them. So, I mean, there has to be such a radical capacity. You have to develop capacity to listen to the voices that you don't want to hear. And the death kiss is when you start dividing the parish. Right? So, in other words, you only hang out with the vestry people and the people who agree with you at fellowship time, rather than walking across to the people who disagree with you and saying, hey, I know we're sideways about X, Y, and Z, but how are you doing? Right? That's our work. All of that is the capacity to mobilize people to address tough problems, especially problems they'd rather avoid. And so that's why we say it's not just go. I don't mean it, I hope I didn't sell it as simplistic as that. It is a lot of work about who are they, what do they want, and ultimately, friend, you may have to say, I don't think this continues to be a good fit. I mean, I've pastored some priests right now who are like, they pushed all the levers, they've done the work, and the community is crystal clear that they want a chaplain. And let's not disparage them. They're clear. Right? And so what I have to do is I have to be clear. Do we still have a match? Right? I don't have to, shake the dust off my sandals, but I have to be clear, right? Do I feel that God has given me a charism to grow, to do that kind of work? And if so, where can I go to exercise that? I'm talking about big boy and big girl stuff here. Right? But we can do it with the spirit of love. We can. I'll tell you a story I was going to tell you tomorrow, but I'll tell you this and it'll be the end. So when I started off, and you guys will remember this, I think my first big clergy day, right, I had Ron Heifetz himself to come visit us. Now, Ron gets about $55,000 a day to talk, right? And I didn't have that. But the good news was that Ron had relatives in Atlanta, so he came to visit us. And, and my canon to the ordinary and I took him out for a fancy lunch. Now, she had taken the classes, and I had taken the classes. I'd read the books. I knew his work for years. And so, I'm poised, man. I'm salivating. We're at lunch, the rolls and the iced tea hadn't hit the table. I was like, here we are with the guru, the oracle, the font of all wisdom. I'm about to get it. He's about to give me the keys to the kingdom. I'm going to have the most successful episcopate there ever is to have. It's cooking, man. That's great, right? The food comes out, and, I'm rushing. I'm talking about change and this and development, and we're going to grow. We're going to do this. Can't you just see it? And so Ron said to me, he said, I hear what you're saying, but can I just remind you something? Like, here we go. Here it comes. If you want to affect change, you have to love people. I was never so damn disappointed. I was so disappointed. So, right, here's a guy right out of Jesus' own tradition reminding me of something I already know that Jesus said a long time ago. But I think I heard it that time, which is to say there are no gimmicks. You can get all these coordinates and still be condescending towards people, still be smug, and you won't move the needle one blip. People are not going to trust you with the things they find precious if they don't get a sense from you that you care and that you can understand what they're going to lose to run the experiment you say is critical. That's not what I paid that fancy lunch for, But it helped me to understand that perhaps one of the capacities that you and I need to increase in to mobilize people to address tough problems, especially problems they'd rather avoid, is that they have to have some sense that we have the capacity to love them, particularly the outlier voices. Particularly the outlier voices. People are sniffing you over, and they want it, if you smell just like the world, they can get division and hatred, fraction. They can get that any damn where. Why they got to come to church and get it from you, right? Or from me? But the qualitative advantage here, and Jesus is clear, bless those, right, who curse you. Pray for those who despitefully use you. Bless your enemies. Pray for your enemies. That's capacity building, right? And then we spend that capacity, I hope, on moving towards more righteous goals. in our ministry context. I'm sorry to give, short, relatively short answers, because you're asking a really important question, which is, how do you meet people? How do you get a sense of people and walk with people over some really rough terrain? But that story is one that I keep going back to, especially when I'm looking for a gimmick or a shortcut. That's just a great reminder. So that's our time. I want to honor our time boundary. I have really appreciated it. I think I get to do chapel, the privilege of doing chapel, a 7-minute homily. You think 7 minutes is going to work for me tomorrow? 7-minute homily, and then I have another hour, I think, tomorrow afternoon. So how about, is it okay if I lead the prayer and so on? Okay. So y'all like Compline over here? One of my favorite prayers in Compline: keep watch, dear Lord, with those who work or watch or weep this night, and give your angels charge over those who sleep. Tend the sick, Lord Christ. Give rest to the weary. Bless the dying. Soothe the suffering. Pity the afflicted. Shield the joyous. And all for your love's sake. Amen. Praise God, from whom all blessings flow. Praise him, all creatures here below. Praise him above, ye heavenly hosts. Praise Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. Now comes the best part. Amen. Let us bless the Lord.